Welcome to Geek Out Weekly, the podcast where we geek out, not so strongly, on a roughly 7-day basis. I'm your host, Adil, and I'm joined by Ben.
Hey everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Was it a week absence, isn't it?
Yeah, I think. Now I've lost track. No, wait, we did
No.
Army of the Dead.
We did Army of the Dead last
Yeah,
week, which will come out
the
at some
welcome
point.
back last week. Glad to have you still here this week. What a great start. Um, what are we talking about? That we are talking about Disney Plus Marvel's latest series, Loki. Um, yeah. So as always, I'm gonna throw to you and say first impressions.
So we've had two episodes. Actually, on the day we're recording now, there is a third episode out. Disney Plus have shifted their release times to come out on a Wednesday now, rather than a Friday
Mm.
for their new shows. So, because we had some rescheduling as well this week on the day that we record, there's actually a third episode out. And my initial thoughts are, I want to watch the third episode.
Mm.
I think Loki has captured me more quickly than either of the other two
Mm.
TV Marvel Disney TV shows so far. You know, when we talked about WandaVision, those first couple of episodes were a little bit slower to kind of get into. They were working through the themes of the sort of the show and the aesthetic and tone that they were kind of going for. And I remember us discussing at length the basis for that and our kind of nostalgia or lack of for those kind of shows and how that plays into getting into it. With Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think we sort of again similarly thought, well, this is kind of a good showing for it to sort of start off on. It's given us a little bit of action, it's given us a little bit of intrigue. I think Loki has just jumped straight in and gone, this is what this show's about. There's comedy, it's Loki kind of trying to be and trying to scheme, trying to be sort of like the bigger person, but actually coming up a cropper in most sort of cases,
Yeah.
trying to use his mischievous kind of ways and not getting the kind of results that he's sort of used to. And there's comedy around that, but there's also intrigue and a much bigger kind of stage as well that's sort of at work within sort of the Marvel universe, and how that builds into that. So it's already got me into kind of thinking, yeah, Loki's a great character. I mean, he was in all of his previous showings, but has come straight back into this as a character that I'm really invested in and really like.
Mm.
The other characters as well have done very well to kind of form around sort of Loki, and you start to kind of get to know them a little bit in the episodes, but also on that galactic Marvel scale of going, this is kind of where this show sits, and you know that stuff is going to be pulled more in. So yeah, initial impressions, it's done, I think, for me so far better than the other two at pulling me straight in.
I have to say I agree. Although, as we talked about in the WandaVision episode, which you can look at the backlogs, I grew up watching
Mm.
shows like the Dick Van Dyke Show and like so there's that less so the middle episodes, but I was already
Mm-hmm.
sort of drawn in by those early ones, and I think it's just unique because of those first few episodes. And then I Falcon the Winter Soldier is a thing I will never watch again, but I didn't mind watching. And this, I mean, who knows if but so far I'm also like, great, this is great, but also it's great because it's not, it doesn't have to do, it manages to both be a continuation of Endgame,
Mm.
but also a whole lot of stage setting and not a lot of time. Like it starts with the Loki who steals the Tesseract, and everyone's like, "Wait, what?" Um, being revealed to have started a divergent timeline and getting taken to the TVA, the Time. Oh, I forgot
Variance
already. Time
authority.
Variance
Mm.
Authority. Yeah. Um, and you're like, cool. But because of that, because it starts with a familiar scene and like literally just copy paste from the movie,
Yeah.
and then him showing up in Mongolia and then getting taken away. You're like, ah, right, cool. I know sort of where this. We have the benefit. I know where this Loki is coming from.
Hmm.
Which
Yes.
I have a follow up, but then just stay on track, then it's like, where is this place? And you get to learn about this place because he's getting a tour, and so all of the exposition dumps are directed at him, but obviously at you.
Yep.
It's quite well crafted, and having the animations and the like,
Mm.
it's like an 80s government institution trying to like uh give you a quick like intro of what things are doing. Like it's just, yeah, those like, our company does this, like that you would show kids touring your, I don't know, fertilizer plant or something, some really mundane thing that for some reason kids have come on a tour, and you've paid some shitty animation company to like go make it. That's the
Yep.
vibe of like half of this. Is just like, and now we're doing this. This is, or like this is how a bill is passed, um edutainment cartoons that played in North America.
Mm.
And it was just really great because you get all of the exposition done really quickly.
Yeah. And
It explains big plot holes in the Marvel universe at the same time.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
and
kind of. It just says, "Oh, there's plot holes. Don't worry, we get rid of them,"
but
which I think is
it's
great.
interesting, isn't it? That kind of to launch sort of straight into it. There's a scene in the first episode where when Loki's kind of on trial, when he's brought into the TVA, and you go through that kind of exposition dump. You have that really cool, as you say, that kind of infomercial style, or not even infomercial, sort of informational video kind of style on what the TVA are with. Is it Miss Minute, the character, the little
Yeah,
clock who appears again later? But when he's on trial, he's like, yeah, but the Avengers did this. And what's her name? Ravonna Renslayer,
yeah,
the judge who is it's sort of sat above him, kind of alludes to the fact that that was fine. You know, that this
yeah.
whole idea that there is this sacred timeline, and you have the timekeepers, the lizard people, as Loki kind of keeps referring to them as, sitting over this, making sure, and the TVA making sure that this sacred timeline is the only thing that's continuing, getting rid of all of the variations and stuff. That the event, all of the stuff that happens,
Including
in
Thanos and the Infinity Stones and the loops. That those
all
are
of that
all.
is suggested that it is like sanctioned in some kind of
Yeah.
way. So it's interesting to sort of have this setting and be like, wow, we can like suddenly the Marvel universe was, you know, the Marvel setting was based on Earth in Phase 1, right up to the end of Phase 1, and then suddenly we get sort of, you know, alien invasion stuff, and it starts to take those steps out, and then you have the Marvel universe, which isn't really associated with the stuff that's going on in Earth with things like Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff, and then it starts to all form together to get towards sort of Endgame. And now they've gone, how do we now expand on this? Time. Perfect.
But what I find is really interesting is so in the backstory they say there were multiverses, but the
Yes.
multiverses fought. Whatever the fuck that means. I mean, I love how it's just a picture of like these tube flows that are the multiverses, and then they're like trying to bash into each other. Like, yeah, multiverses fight, and you're like, this doesn't make sense, right? Like, what does that
So,
mean? It doesn't matter. So what matters is the lizards came together and they said, this is the good one, this is the timeline, and then any divergent path they get rid of. That's
yep.
what, I mean, that's what matters for the plot. But I also think, I mean, seeing as we've sort of gone to the topic of the greater Marvel impact, how Doctor Strange in the what's the name, the title of the Doctor Strange movie again?
Multiverse of Madness?
Aha. But there isn't supposed to be a multiverse because
Yes.
lizards. So this also, I think, anyone who sort of pays attention to the Marvel meta titling and like the things that are going on, and how this phase is working, as soon as that infomercial happens, you're like, wait, what? But we know that like Chaos Wanda is definitely in the multiverse thing, and the chaos energy is like making things out of nothing and really like seemingly breaking things. And Doctor Strange had the time stone and saw different paths, but I guess he just saw the one the sacred timeline would take. but then what was he seeing? Just potential, like all these things click through, and then you're like, oh, and also Doctor Strange's movie is literally the madness of the multiverses or whatever. It's like, oh, this series could go anywhere now that
Yes.
we have the, because they're giving us a little like a box of there is one timeline, but with knowledge that they're calling the other timelines multiverses,
Hmm.
and we know that the multiverses are going to be later. Holy crap, what is going to happen in this?
Yeah,
And I
and
really like the folding in on itself of the Marvel narrative in a way that isn't like, oh, you got to wait till Doctor Strange. It's not like saying, it's not kicking the ball down the road and be like, you have to watch this to figure out. It's like, oh, now I'm super curious about what's going to happen here.
hmm
Episode 1, minute 7 or whatever.
yeah, I think it's interesting to see kind of we've taken Loki out of his time at the end or during the first Avengers film.
End of First
Yep,
Avengers.
at the end of the first Avengers film. So, where will this, by the time we get to the end of this series, dependent on kind of what happens to Loki, whether something happens and he's put back into a timeline or put back into his timeline kind of further on, or kind of what happens, because obviously he's after Endgame, or is it in Endgame or the Infinity War where he's killed? One of them, Infinity War, he's killed by Thanos, right?
Yeah, and he
Is
sees that.
Yep. Is he then inserted
He's not
into?
inserted at all. They cover this in episode 1 that he should be removed as a variant.
Yes, yes, but you've got to imagine that at the end of this there is some kind of get out for him, and whether that is a breaking of everything and he then is able to go into a
Go
timeline in
anywhere.
some kind of way and going anywhere. Where does he kind of where do we get at the end of this? Are we suddenly like, right, Endgame has now happened and Loki's just popped up again because he's decided to
I
insert
assume.
himself in this timeline after his death, at that point, after all of this shit's gone on? So it's interesting because obviously with time stuff, it can be anywhere it sort of wants to be. And the idea that, saying that if stuff does break and he comes in earlier than that, when Doctor Strange goes around and looks at all of these different variations during Endgame and seeing sort of the path that needs to be taken, that actually are things broken at that point for him to be able to do that? Like, it has extra kind of connotations on the other films and stuff, which I'd like them to kind of address, but I can see them just going, yeah, he's now here. Don't worry about anything that's
Oh,
gone
I
before.
assume. Yeah, I assume he's gonna enter in like the end of WandaVision, end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier
Mm.
timeline.
Mhm.
If he continues his role, which I wouldn't see why he wouldn't. I don't think Tom's ever said the Robert Downey Jr. Chris Evans line of I'm done with this.
Mhm.
But I mean, yeah. So I thought you meant where would he be like put? Like where would it be a safe place he'd be put? But
Oh
I
no,
think you're right. He's gonna run himself away somewhere.
yeah, yeah,
And I think it'll be in the current Marvel era,
hmm
just because I don't think they might want to undo some things, but I don't think they want to make it that difficult for themselves, and I doubt they have to because yeah. So I mean, this feels like what I'm curious. So are you familiar with the DC storyline Flashpoint or
a,
Crisis on Infinite
a
Earths or
little,
like all these ones? Like
yeah,
basically the Flash is almost always, because it can run faster than light, always key to resetting the DC universe.
hmm
Like Sudden Infinite Earths was like realizing there were multiverses and then everything collapsing into one timeline. I'm curious as to whether it will go the other way with the Loki's making, like we end episode 2 with new timelines are being formed all over the world essentially.
hmm
In 20, oh, I missed the time. Did you catch the date, the year they were that
no, no,
disaster was? Yeah, doesn't matter. But yeah, so and then that's what opens the multiverse up,
hmm
or like the walls of the multiverse that allow very crazy like divergent paths to be released or something. That's my guess.
yeah,
And Loki's gonna ultimately have a hand, like let's call this Loki 1,
hmm
because Loki Prime's dead by Thanos, right? He's the
yep,
sacred timeline Loki.
hmm
So this is, I guess, Tesseract Loki. Tesseract Loki, um, I think he's going to survive or try to survive, and he's going to do that by finding a way to live, and that means he cannot be in the sacred timeline,
Yeah, and we've already
right?
sort of seen his sort of machinations, how he's trying to get around Owen Wilson's Mobius character, and
Yeah,
constantly saying, "Oh, can I get to talk to the sacred timekeepers? Like, how can I plead my case?" kind of thing, and
yeah,
all of these different sort of things where he's trying to think so many steps ahead and how he can get out of this. Culminating in the kind of conversation he has with Lady Loki.
yes. Which I called the second time you see an attack and don't see a face. I'm like, it's definitely a woman.
Yep, Kim and I had exactly the same conversation. Like, yeah, the build, everything, just the way the hood's up, it's got to be. But he also says to her, like, I'm going to take over the TVA. You can help me.
Yeah,
And she's like, nah, I got I got other stuff.
I got bigger
Yeah, I
plans.
got bigger plans, mate. Don't worry about it. But it's where are we going with this? He's trying to get out, and you imagine
Yeah,
he
I mean,
will
I
at
think
some point.
so. Yeah, so I like that. So I mean, what I like is I took very few notes because actually a lot of this is world building and
Mhm.
interest and intrigue and characters,
Yep.
and like the actual plot is Loki is variant, and it turns out there's Owen Wilson is like, I don't want you to kill that variant because he can help us hunt this other variant, who turns out is a different Loki. And I especially, I mean, the build up was very clear because they're like, you've been a variant a bunch. Sometimes you're this weird troll giant guy. Sometimes you won in a football match.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, for Team Loki, because his name was on the front. It was a very weird image. And then they like didn't show a gender swapped one. I'm like, it's a gender swapped
Mm.
Loki,
Well, that's
right? It was just
so there's part of Loki's character, isn't there? And I wasn't really aware of
yeah,
this, but there is part of Loki's character where he can gender swap, right? He's gender fluid in terms of being able to be either in a physical form.
yeah,
Um,
and chooses to for long periods of time
yes,
be either. That's
yes,
one of the
that's
things that character's done in the comics a
absolutely, and I
bunch. Yeah,
didn't realize that until I'd kind of read a couple of things after the sort of the second episode in this reveal. I was like, oh, I've never really come across this idea of Lady Loki before, so I had a quick look, and yeah, seems that Loki as a character is happy to sort of be either. So it's interesting to see again how that what they've done as well with that is that Loki makes a choice about which gender they want to be for a specific
yeah,
period or for a specific moment or whatever, and how they can change that. But they've never delved into that in the films, and now they're kind of
yeah.
presenting two separate ones: a male version and a female version. And as you say, all of those other variants were kind of shown to be male. But do they then play this in at some point? Is it Loki in a female form, or is it someone completely
Hmm.
different?
Oh,
And
I'm.
I know there's lots of little bits, and there's been some kind of leaks, and there was a toy leak which gave the Lady
Oh, I didn't
Loki
know.
character a name. There was also a credit in, I think, something like the Spanish language version, which rather than putting Lady Loki put a different name on there as well, and that then alludes to another character in the Marvel universe.
Oh,
So
see, I've done a good job of not looking into leaks and things. That would actually kind of be disappointing to me
mhm,
because it's a thing that the character is, and it's like a classic Disney trying to have their cake and eat it too. Like, look,
yes,
we're woke. We're showing this gender fluid character. But don't worry, it's not really that.
but
So
not at all.
if you don't like that,
Mm.
it's someone pretending to be. So that would be yeah. I'll be disappointed, but I won't be surprised. Um, but also that makes me question. Well, yeah, because like they just how do they know it's a variant? Presumably, or a Loki, I
I
guess
don't
is
know.
the
I
thing.
don't know. I don't think that's kind of explained in anything. It's just
No, I
it's
mean a lot of
you.
their tech is
We're looking for you, basically.
yeah, and a lot of their tech is like conveniently underexplained because it doesn't really make sense.
Yes.
But I think that's fine for a timey-wimey thing
Hmm.
rather than just like trying to reconcile it. But like, yeah, so you just assume that they're magic palm pilots that are like orange on black monochrome would be like, oh, it's a variant, it's a Loki, because that's kind of, these things just have all this information. And then if it's not, then it's like, okay, so then how? It's that classic thing we talked about when we're talking about Army of the Dead as well, right? And I talk about a bunch, which is like, if it turns out not to be Loki, then now we have to question if, and they don't give an explanation on how the TVA was tricked outside of it. This person is wearing a Loki helmet, which is right now all we have,
Yes.
right? Then it's like, okay, so did they just, could anyone put a Loki helmet on and trick them, or is this like a deeper trick
Yeah, and
involving?
considering she says as well, when he calls her Loki, she says, "I hate that name." Um, it
Yeah,
kind of, there are little clues in there which are sort of suggesting that it's not, but it does then make you question everything, right? In
yeah.
terms of how the TVA kind of go about their business. So there's something that I thought of when you were talking about the when it was explained about those, all of those divergent timelines kind of battling before the sacred timeline was sort of put together, or
Yeah,
however that
or
works.
picked.
And you saying about Flashpoint, Crisis on Infinite Earths in DC, there is some Marvel comparisons to this as well. And I think it was a New Avengers comic run when it had been gone for a little while and came back. It's one of the more modern. I mean, it's not even modern. It's probably like 5 or 6 years ago now, if not a little bit more than that. It's one that I picked up, which was New Avengers, but it was Professor X, Black Panther, Reed Richards, and lots of Earths were all kind of on a collision course with each other. There was this idea that someone was trying to make this sort of like one timeline and to get it all, so all of these Earths were converging, and they had to travel through, however Reed Richards' brain works,
Yeah.
to get the technology to be able to do it. But they then travelled through to basically destroy the Earths that were going to then crash into theirs, and had battles with the heroes of those Earths to be able to then kind of do that. So it would be interesting
And
if they
Dave Matthews
start to,
Band is playing in the background. Sorry, go on.
and then I think that then led on to Battle World, where people were brought in, and there's like this whole Kang, who again is a time traveling kind of character.
Yeah,
So there's lots of stuff in Marvel which I can see them kind of bringing into this without ever coming back to those kind of storylines again, if you know what I mean. Like
which
there's stuff that they're going to be doing. So we know like Secret Invasion's going to be happening later down the line. There's the Captain Marvel 2 is now called The Marvels or something like that. So again,
yeah,
shows a
and
bit
it's
more of an ensemble kind of. And we talked about this before as well, didn't we? Like is Captain Marvel 2, which is going to be the last film, or at least we thought the last film in this kind of phase, how are they bringing people in? And they've kind of shown that they might be doing that with a name change. So it's really interesting to know how far ahead Marvel have planned to then say, right, we know that in the next 20 years we're not touching this. It's to do with time travel. Let's see what we can fold in to this kind of series. And again, when we talked about the idea of there being multiple seasons of some of these, discounting WandaVision, maybe Falcon and the Winter Soldier gets another one, maybe Loki does as well. But interesting to see if they stick around on that kind of thing, because Loki's not getting his own film, right? And he's always been a supporting character in the Thor films and the Avengers films and those sorts of things. A villain for the first sort of Avengers film. So I think, as you'd sort of said, Tom Hiddleston hasn't said he doesn't want to do the character, or that he's only got X amount of stuff in him. So it kind of interesting to see that, is this going to be the kind of, maybe not yearly, but a season, or have several seasons which deal with all of the time travel kind of stuff. I think I also read something somewhere that Kang the Conqueror is going to be included in one of the films as well, and has been cast for one of the films. I cannot remember which one it is.
Kang is. He is what? He's like a descendant of Doom?
No, he's a
No,
descendant
Reed
of Reed
Richards.
Richards. Yeah.
Yeah, and he just finds Doom's time travel tech.
Hmm.
That's what it is.
Yep.
And he like really likes yeah, that's right. He thinks Doom is his ancestor, and then the twist of his like one of his early things is he's not actually Doom's um time yeah, he's actually from descended from Reed. That's right.
Hmm.
Um yeah, so well, you bring that up. Fantastic Four is I think the last film slated for Phase 4.
Oh, have they actually revealed it?
It's been announced. It's just yeah, it in the July 2019 Comic-Con it was announced it was being developed,
Ah.
but um that's like literally I think the only real information.
Let's have a look.
So yeah,
I'm gonna put
I mean I'm going off of
Kang in the
Wikipedia.
MC. Yes, we are a little bit, but it all kind of ties in. This is the thing. Is Loki
No,
gonna
I
be
mean so
this
this
kind of
is
thing
why I
that
like this series because this is like a Marvel. This feels like hey, do you like the MCU? This is the show that's doing MCU stuff. This isn't like this feels like if you think of Falcon and Winter Soldier as like a Thor or a Thor 2, like a thing in the MCU, this feels like a Thor Ragnarok where you're bringing people from other movies
Mm,
into the same
mm.
thing and it's not actually the great part is it's not, right? It's literally all new characters except for someone who's already dead. But like it just brings thematically it feels very much like a core MCU thing because all the questions we have etc are about how things work in the universe and we're at the universe level in the MCU.
Yep.
So I think that's why it's like and I mean they're doing great cliffhangers at the end, right?
Mm.
It's just yeah, so like the cliffhanger in episode 1 was Loki's the bad guy. Is the bad variant and then the cliffhanger in episode 2 is this female Loki is our Loki is this blonde but also Loki, the variant, Tesseract Loki, decides to jump through the time door to follow Loki and doesn't stay with Owen Wilson's Mobius,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so yeah, I'm super interested in where this is going. I also like the when you think about it, like there's been like except for when they go to places, which is like a Ren fair. So it feels like a very big show, but actually, if you think about the sets and stuff, it's like, well, you've got the TVA, which is like 4 rooms,
Yep.
except for the like CGI look, it's a big
Big city.
technological
Yeah.
city that Loki is like, what do you mean you don't have magic? Which I thought was interesting.
Mm. Well, it is interesting,
Um,
but obviously Loki only has his understanding of the universe to kind of go
no,
on, right?
but, but Ben, this is the Loki right after the end of Avengers 1, where he literally invoked the Chitauri who have flying vehicles
Yeah, but
to
that's just
come.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think so, yeah, but so but yeah, except for that, it's like the judge room, the like training, the office area, which is just an office area, the like with cubicles and everything, the fancy boss's office, the little jail cell he was in, and a couple hallways.
Mm.
Kind of that's it,
Yeah.
and that's the TVA, and then it's like we're gonna time travel to a Ren fair, and you're like, it's not even. They don't even have to like dress it up that well because it's not. We're traveling to the medieval times, is we're traveling
It's
to a Ren fair, so it's a very easy set to make. There's a tent and some people in
in a field.
old timey dress,
Yeah.
and then they like when they go to the uh Pompeii, it's obviously a CGI'd volcano in the background, and it's just like a couple of shacks and the goat pen
Yeah.
and they never
A
move.
street.
He literally leaves. They're hiding, and then he leaves and yells, "Let some goats out!" And then we leave there.
Yep.
It's like such a contained set.
Mm.
And then similarly, we go to they appear, and then there's just people in a building huddling from this dangerous event apocalypse,
Yeah.
which I'll get to in a
Superstore.
second.
Mm.
Yeah, and then it's a mall. It's a grocery store that's next door, essentially.
Yeah.
Like these are the sets. This is a tiny show that feels so big because then the world building is really so well done.
Yes.
And like everyone's, you really believe, oh, we've just zapped around, right? Like the effects and the acting are good enough and the direction that you just are like, oh wow, they're here now, which I think is
I agree.
really it's impressive, and I think that's what's keeping me on is like, oh, the just the caliber of everything from the simple sets being well dressed enough to be convincing, the acting, the direction, the effects work.
Mm.
Well, I think having the time travel just be literally, you can make this in Blender. It's like a semi-translucent, like monolith, thin orange monolith, and the hardest part is having the person phase
Phase through it.
through,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is like not that difficult, and then they blip away. It's like that's your primary effect
Mm. It
for
is.
the biggest sci-fi element.
I
Like it's
completely
great.
agree, and it'd be interesting to see how that progresses kind of through the series. You would imagine that this is now going to be Loki at least bopping through different periods, whether that's on those divergent paths, whether that's on the sacred timeline at different points in time, and how that kind of plays out. Does he decide actually I need to kind of rein some of this in? It's for me to have control. If we go back to kind of Loki's whole
Yeah.
persona, him having the idea of having control about all of this and being able to then say be in charge of the TVA, does he kind of pick and choose kind of what he reins in, what he allows to run free? It'd be interesting to see how that develops, but how then the series develops in terms of, are we going to go to like a small backwards kind of backwards. We're in time, so it doesn't need to be. We go back to an ancient civilization, and again, we can have a little bit of CGI for the backgrounds and a few different kinds of buildings and things like that. And most of it kind of can happen around in that kind of one set per episode. Then that there's not a huge amount of stuff kind of going on in each of them. So. Very, very interesting point. And to talk about it being more expanded by bringing in these sort of ideas and stuff. To go back to Kang, it looks like
Mm.
from an article on cineworld.co.uk that Jonathan Majors has been cast as Kang the Conqueror. I've got no idea who he is. It tells you what he's been in. Lovecraft Country, which I've not seen.
Mm.
Lovecraft Country. That's a mouthful. He's also in the Five Bloods, which I have watched.
Oh, what's that?
It is the Five Bloods, or The Five Bloods, is Spike Lee
Oh,
film on Netflix about a group of guys who were in the Vietnam War who go back to Vietnam because they'd buried a load of gold. So they go back
right.
to get said gold. And lots of shit happens. It's very good. But it says on the end of this article that he is going to be in Ant-Man 3.
Oh,
So that's when he's appearing, which is slated for 2022, maybe. Who knows?
yeah. I guess it's all kind of up in the air, isn't it?
Yes. So, kind of, you can. I mean, Kang is something that feels like it would fit, but all of these things are then making those bigger moves, aren't they? We're talking about Doctor Strange 2, Multiverse of Madness. I think Ant-Man 3 is called something like Quantumania or something. And I guess that's going to be a similar kind of things going into the quantum verse and doing stuff on that kind of scale. Like, it's going to get nuts. And I think Loki can be a very good anchor for all of this kind of stuff. I think Loki is the kind of show that can be a yearly thing. Just a 10-run episode, a 10-run season, be yearly without getting too crazy. Because, as you say, the scale of the production of it feels like it would then fit with that. We'll kind of see how it goes. But as I say, I think it can be a good anchor for kind of everything that is happening. And that's only based on the 2 episodes we've had so far. Which I think shows how good the writing is as well, and sort of how good all of these characters have kind of been portrayed.
Yeah, so like let's go to the other. Let's chat a bit about the characters here. So I think the the judge, Ravonna Renslayer,
Hmm.
for having almost no, like, very few actual screen time minutes. I think she's well developed. She's like the boss character, but she's reports to the lizards, but also she seems to be the only one who has access to them, and so there's like some interesting, like, like just the way that scene in her office played out. I'm like, are the lizards still around?
And
Right?
there's that idea as well that Owen Wilson or Mobius is kind of like her agent, but then she's got another agent because he makes a couple of things about, oh, who brought you this, the trophy kind of thing. I know that I brought you these. Where have these kinds of things come from? Who's done
Yeah.
this kind of thing? So interesting that I think she's going to then play a more pivotal role in explaining kind of where the TVA are now. And as you say, are the timekeepers still around, or is it just sort of being held together by a bit of masking tape and Renslayer kind of just trying to battle and bring kind of everyone
Yeah.
together? But again, I'm not geeking out so weekly this week. I've got more stuff to drop. Ravonna Renslayer and Kang the Conqueror are very much intertwined in the comics.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't know that.
he falls for her after enslaving her planet, and then there's lots of stuff going on with that character, and how then I can't remember the name of who Kang the Conqueror then changes his name to when he is an old man after going through multiple kind of times,
Mm,
Immortus or something like that. Um, but then
that sounds about right.
she then Ravonna Renslayer gets with Immortus or whatever his name is, and then tries to kill Kang and all of this sort of stuff. So again, another kind of touchstone for this series to suggest that there's other stuff going on, and we'll see as we will with the idea of whoever Lady Loki may be, whether it is a Loki and a female version of, not a female
Mm,
version of, but someone presenting as a female, another variant Loki presenting as a female. If it is or isn't, and there's lots of times when they've brought the MCU brought characters in and not kind of given them their full, comic kind of persona, where they are then
yeah.
just this character here doing this job for said film or whatever. How is she going to sort of play in with that? Are we going to get that link from her and kind of Kang as well? They may just choose to ignore it. So
Yeah, I mean, that's what I like about the MCU is that it's like remixing stuff,
yeah.
pulling on stuff, but not afraid to not do the same thing.
Hmm.
I think they learned a lot from the Ultimate comics, making them some money when they were in trouble by
Yeah.
rebooting things, and so one, I think the early MCU films were definitely like more Ultimates leaning,
Mm.
and now they realize that they get to take the best of all of those things, and it doesn't matter. People are just happy so long as like the MCU makes sense with itself.
Yes.
They can just, hey, this was a popular run. This is an interesting character. What? How can it fit with what we're doing now?
Mm.
Um, so that's interesting. The We don't actually have that many people. So we
No.
got Loki, Ravonna, B-15, which is the main TVA hunter,
Yes. Yeah.
and like is basically Loki's antagonist
Hmm.
until we meet Loki.
Who again, and I really like the kind of little back and forth between them. He'll make a comment and she will sort of like snap back at it, or the
Yeah.
opposite way around. I think those two characters have worked quite well, kind of against
Hmm.
each other so far. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so my one complaint character-wise is she's quite two-dimensional.
Yes. Yeah.
She's just angry at Loki.
Hmm.
Doesn't like the idea of a variant at all, to the point of being insubordinate,
Mm.
which isn't great, but like, I guess like once we start talking about characters, I'm like, oh, Ravonna like feels like she has depth to her personality, and part of that, and she's interesting, and part of that interesting is just because she's more powerful character, so she might have a role later on.
Hmm.
But like that, it's also just the way she's written. She's like, we just don't know stuff, but there's clearly other things going on. And B-15 seems like grunt angry.
And it again, it will be interesting to see how that plays out further in the
Hmm.
episodes because from what is it Mobius or Morbius?
Mobius, like the
Mobius.
Mobius strip,
Morbius is a
is the
vampire
vampire
in
character
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So Mobius says sort of to Loki, we were made. We were made by the Timekeepers. When the Timekeepers have done their job, we will be gone. So it's interesting that like to see how these characters fit within their say role within the TVA. So talking about kind of like her being grunt angry, are they all going to be like that? Are all of the hunters just have they been made and have they been made for that like one purpose? And is that what we're getting from these characters now, or will we see when they get a little bit more screen time? I would imagine that she's going to be if we do go down the route of Loki jumping through different times, that she will be hunting him through said
Yeah.
times. So will it just be that Superman energy, or do we get a little bit more depth?
Yeah.
Interesting
And
to see
I'm
how
only
they
saying
play
that
that
because,
out.
like, yeah, I mean, she's just like, I like that she has just like the drive and like takes no guff about it.
Mm,
Like I said, to the point of kind of being insubordinate, because you're like, it seems like Mobius is, they're like on different tracks, but it seems like he's theoretically above her in the hierarchy. Although
mm-hmm.
she's like, this is my mission. Like it's like
Yes.
that classic. I'm higher up in the organization, but once we hit boots are on the ground, it doesn't matter that I am because you're in charge of the thing, right?
Yep.
And she's aware of that. Um, and but like her, like also in the first scene where Loki escapes, um, Mobius is like, "Don't kill him. I think I can still use him." And then she literally swipes at him and almost kills him, and
Yep.
instead disintegrates. What did she disintegrate? I can't remember. A thing. A thing. She hits a thing with her thing, and then it goes away. And you're like, oh, she don't care if she
Mm.
thinks this is the right thing to do. She's gonna do it. Which I liked that character having that drive. I just would like to see either a second dimension of like via other drives or some information on why like if the timekeepers really made her and made Mobius, why are they so different in
Yes.
their dedication,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
um I I think that the timekeepers created nobody.
I would also hazard a guess that that was correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Um okay, so there is a it's me. You have my logic brain. The MCU has this classic problem that happened in Infinity War and Endgame, and it's repeating itself here. And I just have to talk conceptual um, problem of show, or at least it's weird. So in Endgame, Infinity War, the snap, right, is
Mhm.
all 50% of all life in the universe goes away, but it's all life really just means sentient life,
Mhm.
because it didn't seem like half of Earth got deforested.
Yes.
I mean, it's at random, but like, also, we are composed of multiple living things that aren't part of us, like our gut flora. And if our gut flora disappeared, we'd die. So actually, more than half the people would probably die. Stuff like that. Okay, we could just say Thanos said he was killing half of, or what? Like the stones knew what he was trying to do, which was
Yep.
kill a certain type of life form,
Sure.
and he just said all life. Okay, fine. But like, still bothers me every time they kept repeating, "Oh, off the life of the universe." It's like, because it's just so anthropocentric,
Mhm.
and it didn't even seem like they killed half the horses. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't they haven't referenced any of the non-human or human-esque, like human in the humanoids type sentient
Completely.
beings,
Completely.
and
They didn't kill then
it
half
bothered
of
me.
all of the, half of all of endangered species on Earth. The whole idea was that sentient life, at least in terms of civilization creating kind of life,
Well,
is ruining the planets that they're on and all of this sort of stuff. So let's get rid of half
like,
of them. But
I
yeah,
mean,
if you get rid of half of like all of life, then you're probably endangering even more species and things than the original intent was.
Which I think Thanos would be fine with again, because the
Yeah,
way they
yeah.
presented but by making it about overpopulation, Thanos is basically saying, "Hey, I could just reset the clock, and then it'll take longer to get here again," which is such a stupid plan. Because then it's like, what, are you going to stick around for another million years and snap again?
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. So
Right,
my
he's got the time
but
stone.
that
He can jump every million years and just snap, jump a million years, snap, jump a million
why
years,
didn't
snap.
he? He didn't, did he? Anyway, so yeah, he really thought he was done the one time. He's like, yeah, life will never get this big. That's not
Yeah.
how life
And
works.
then he just,
Anyway,
oh, I remember, he just went to this shack on a planet,
like,
didn't he? And just kind of sat
yeah,
down like, all done, brilliant.
yeah,
I'm so
like that is
tired.
bothered.
I'll go fishing.
See, I wish they had Disney had the balls to do the original thing, which was he's a Titan, a type of
Mhm.
god. He's in love with death, and he wants to impress death by giving death a lot of death.
All the deaths.
Because
Yeah.
he's the Mad Titan. And I get death is a weird concept, but there's ways you could spin it so it's less anger of the Christians, I'm sure.
Well,
But death is
Hela,
Satan.
in
Yeah,
Thor is that character. So,
yeah,
and that's that those two characters come together. So the characters are there, and this is when we were saying earlier about they're not afraid to kind of take some bits of this and just discard it completely. And we've got Eternals coming out soon as well, who
yeah.
were made who are Titans, who were made by the Titans, who are Titans,
Oh, remember.
who were made by the Titans. I don't remember.
Made by-
The film will tell us at some point. But yeah,
Yeah.
Thanos is part of Eternals as well, at least in sort of like the
Yeah.
comic runs and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So this wasn't just, hey, I'm about Loki, let me bitch about Endgame. What is this like anthropocentric sentient based focus is the one thing that I really know. So I like that Loki figured out Loki's plan. Like
Yep.
Loki figured out new Loki's plan, variant Loki's plan, right? But I hate the plan. I hate the plan for multiple reasons. So the idea is, right, there are these events where everyone dies. So they call these apocalypses.
Yes.
And so an apocalypse means the end of the world. And they start with Ragnarok being, and it's like, yeah, Asgard goes away.
Yep.
And he's like, oh, if Loki goes to Ragnarok, Loki can just hang out, do whatever Loki wants, because it won't change the timeline because it's all going to go away.
Yep.
Okay. Sure. Let's pretend that makes sense. Then we find out that when they say apocalypse, they really just mean a place where a bunch of people died.
Yeah.
Pompeii isn't apocalypse.
Yeah.
A superstorm isn't an apocalypse. It's a place where a bunch of people died. Asgard is like shown as kind of like not quite like a plane rather than a planet, right?
Yes.
Like the only way to like it seems like it's a self-contained thing. So Ragnarok seems like, okay, that's an apocalypse, and there's nothing that escapes it. But like, I don't understand why a superstorm would have the same effects. And why this makes sense is because they assume that the only things that matter in changing the timeline is like people escaping, people's memories, things existing. But like a superstorm, the helmet of one of these guys left after the superstorm's probably going to still be there.
Yeah.
But apparently that's good enough of an apocalypse. Doesn't make sense, right? And but then you like now we roll back and okay. So if it's about changing in the timeline, Loki shows up and makes a change. So as long as that makes a new timeline, it's just now there are two timelines where that event happens and all the people present die. But for that to not matter, that would mean it was the same timeline, but something else like that. There is some like so Loki appears and says, "Meteor's about to crash into your house, Ben." Right?
Yep.
Loki appears and says, "Hey Ben, guess what? You're about to die." And you get surprised. There's a fact. So now there's a timeline where you were surprised, and by Loki and not, and so
Yes.
they're saying it doesn't matter that you were surprised. It's the same timeline, but that doesn't really make any sense.
Hmm.
Like, as soon as you're thinking about it, no, there's two timelines where the rest of the universe is probably fine, but then we ignore butterfly effect things. But also, the whole point is there can't be two parallel timelines, and that's what Loki going to these apocalypses would make. They would
Yes.
just be
Yeah.
virtually the same, but not identical.
And
But
also, it's
even if
the
they were the
idea.
same, they're wrong. We only want one. That's the
Uh
point of the
huh.
timekeeper.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely. That something that shouldn't have happened then does occur and branches that off. And
Yeah.
again, it's hard because are they saying like, as long as I then don't leave my house, or I don't get hit by said meteor and I die, it doesn't matter because the timeline that I'm then on, the um, the one
Surprise
where I've
Ben.
been surprised, as long as I still die, then that timeline is
Well,
quashed so quickly and so instantly that it
but
doesn't
quashed by
show up
what
on
is my
their
point.
data.
So like that's my saying. What my point is, nothing quashes the timeline. According to the science of the show, they have to go and delete all the things that would make the alternate timeline continue.
Hmm.
Right? So they go locally and they push blah, and they make disintegrates. So I guess they're saying because you died, it's the same timeline. Like it really makes no sense. Then it's like as long as it's a very like people's thoughts don't count. Like I guess it's a very factual question mark notion, but I could go deeper and say like, well, your neurons fired in different ways, so that's still a fact. But let's
Yep.
just leave that there and say then the next problem is so I now want to know how why these devices can't detect like if Loki was doing this, surely their scanning equipment would be like, oh, there's new timeline that lasted for 2 seconds. Like the hiding in the
Yeah.
timeline doesn't make
Yeah.
sense
What? Yeah.
unless they've got really bad
Yeah.
devices. And
Exactly.
that's like my
Yeah.
other problem. It's like, oh, I like the idea is cool, but it doesn't make sense for like these really like okay, what does time travel mean in this world?
Hmm.
Any way I can try and model it, I don't think it makes sense. Fine, sure, it's a TV show. I think we should hold authors up to some standard of consistency or thinking about it. But even before that, it's like, well, now your tech doesn't make sense, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why it really bothered me because it's like it's a neat idea that you haven't done enough, and hopefully in later episodes they might address why the tech only shows these divergent paths. But I don't think it'll ever really like. So I have some faith that they could say, oh yeah, it's hard to detect until a timeline emerges, and then we just have to accept that no matter what happens to you in the moments before not just you dying, it has to be some cataclysmic event question mark again which yeah then mind somehow collapses in on itself or whatever. That's never going to get explained away. I think that's just they're like but I could almost think that maybe they will explain the limitations of the tech just because that might be an interesting thing for them to write on like tracking the Lokis.
Mm. Mm.
But it's like it's sad because I really like time travel-y things and this sort of harder sci-fi elements. I like that they're in this show, but they're just not great
Yeah.
in this show.
Yeah. That's fair.
So that was my quibble.
Yeah. No,
Um,
I wouldn't disagree with it. And it'll be,
yeah.
yeah, it's just we need more. We need more. We need more. We need more info on all of these things. And some, even if it's just not a throwaway line as such, but even if it's some kind of comment, even if it's just one of the hunters like bashing their scanner or something because it's not playing up, you're like, oh, this tech isn't great. And they've just shown us that in like 2 seconds of them, some kind
Yeah.
of, environmental part, guy just in the background smacking his thing or whatever. That would just give
Oh,
you little hints that those kinds of things aren't great.
or we find out that actually they have no control over really destroying timelines. There's just one like that the way the tech works is completely different. That'd
Mm.
be interesting. But we're coming up on the hour, so I just want
Hmm.
to ask you, what are you hoping for? There's 10 episodes of this series, right?
Wow. Mm, I think. I mean, it'd be nice to have, as we sort of said, and how I think it's going to go. That we get lots of kind of more self-contained kind of episodes, almost a bit like like Star Trek,
Mm,
Next Generation, or kind of Deep Space Nine, where you have an episode where stuff happens and it's very self-contained and it tells a very nice, neat, concise story, but pushes character motivations along a little bit and does
yeah.
allude to a bigger kind of story. And we sort of saw this through, within WandaVision, they kind of, it wasn't quite self-contained episodes. Everything was pushing you through kind of that. And even with with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, all of that was just a film basically that we could
Yeah.
have gone kind of along. So I want this to be a little bit more sort of serialized in its sort of episodes, I think. And I think we might get it, dependent on what those jumps through time are and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what I want. But in terms of a bigger, wider implication to the MCU, I don't think I have a want. I'd like them to just do what they want to do and see where we end up. Having had this now conversation about all of these things that they could pull in, it will be good to see what actually happens with them.
Yeah, so I looked it up while you were chatting. 6 episodes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I thought it was much longer. I mean, this could be wrong. Yeah, Wikipedia will consist of 6 episodes, but a second season is in development.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Which makes me more happy. Like I said, like you were saying, I really do want this to be kind of like Loki and the Time Police, traipsing around doing silly things, right? And then him being on either side of them at different points, like that would be very interesting, right? Or conversely, like, and then having just this thing parallel to all the other MCU craziness of just like, oh yeah, and there's these guys who exist out of the regular narrative. Like you're right, this gives them the power to have this much more serialized and repeatable because it kind of doesn't matter what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they're mucking about in time, and this is a non-canonical Loki, right? Loki's dead. Everyone thinks he's dead, except for like if they want him to show up and be like, not dead. Like they don't have to. They could just leave him outside in limbo, kind of thing, and just have this roll forward.
Completely.
I didn't realize this was only going to be 6 episodes. I'm super interested in episode 3. Again, same as you. Just want to know. I like the way the story's coming. I'm now a little. So I think some of the character development stuff I'm saying might not happen.
Yeah.
But that's okay. It's mostly just like So I guess it's the point is like with so little action yet so much happening, feeling like a lot has happened because just really good exposition and development. I just would like to see that balanced around all the characters. But it is literally the Loki show, so and we have 2 Lokis. But yeah, that's kind of what I want as well. I want it to end in a way that invites more, which obviously there's a second season. So that's good. But I would like I'll reveal about the multiverse or whatever that isn't like oh everything's crazy, but is kind of like oh this helps like feeds the Marvel meta of like how the Doctor Strange thing is going to happen, how these other things. Like I like the fact that they drip feed these. I don't like when it's forced, which has happened in previous parts of MC. This doesn't like WandaVision kind of just said chaos magic is a thing, and boy, that might be a doozy. She's really good at it, and she's in Doctor Strange, and he's a magician, but not a chaos magician. So like, oh, I can kind of see some writing on some walls. This sounds interesting to me, right? I'm hoping it's something along those lines where it's like we said at the top of the show, right? Like something cracks and more timelines or the multiverse like appears to be not just this one timeline. Something that like maybe it's a cliffhanger, but still we feel like we're in this we're satisfied at the end of season 1.
Yeah.
But but like that again, some move on the main MCU, but not a huge one that like just that upturns what the show is trying to do. I guess is the idea. I don't care what that is. I mean, this is me saying that's probably what's going to happen because there's a season 2, and they do like drip feeding and making people like feeding the rumor mill. So it's going to be something that seems big, but it's really vague and could be like 17 things in the comics.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
And it will be then again if it's in development, whether it's being development, whether it's currently just being written or storyboarded or whatever stage that is at. Again, where it will then fit in. Is it going to be more self-contained and serialized with touches on ramifications or kind of points that do that, or can it be that anchor? We see this. We then have a few films because a Marvel phase is over several years as they eke out kind of. It's probably going to be like 6 or 8 films or whatever it is, plus the TV shows that they have now just for a phase. So,
yeah.
Does Loki get 2 seasons within this phase? So we see one before, say, the Doctor Strange movie. We see one before then, like the Ant-Man movie. The ones that are going to be touching on more kind of time travel, multiverse sort of ways that this can anchor all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it'd be great to see how they do that, if it's more serialized, and where it then fits in within the wider sort of story. So, yeah,
yep,
nice,
excellent. Well, I think that does us for now.
Perfect.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Always a pleasure to chat geeky stuff with you, Ben. If people want to chat to us, they could reach us at podcast@outoflives.net or at outoflivesnet, or Ben at Nova_47, myself at the Omniarch. You can go to outoflives.net for all your podcasts, video gaming, pop culture, news, articles, VODs, including this next act, which is back thanks to comedy being reopened. So it's the new music, new material, new comic, new material comedy night at here in Bristol, and it's a podcast that comes out every week, although we missed a week because of a COVID scare. But yeah, so check that out. Like, subscribe, review on your podcatchers of choice / whatever platform you've stumbled upon us, and please share and chat with us. If this is YouTube, write a thing in the comments. Engagement, it makes the algorithm, send it out to more people. Absolutely. That would really help. Yeah. But yeah, that's it for this week. I've been Aadil.
I've been Ben.
Bye.
See ya.
www.outoflives.net